Thank you for listening to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. In this episode, I'm walking down memory lane with the co-founding partner of TvH and my good friend, Jon Sowerby, where we're going to answer questions that we've been asked throughout the years. For example, how did TvH start? What does TvH stand for? And how do we evolve to where we are today? So I hope you enjoy this episode, but before we get going, here's a word from our sponsor. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. My name is Jim Leo. I'm partner of TvH Group, president of TvH Financial, and private wealth advisor at Raintree Financial Solutions. And for those of you who are watching this, you'll see that today I have a guest. And for those of you who are listening, well, I'm going to tell you that today I have a guest. And today I'm joined by co-founding partner of TvH and my good friend, Jon Sowerby. Jon, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks very much, Jim.
That's good. That's good. So listen, before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping here. So as I mentioned, for those of you who maybe are not into podcasting, if you'd like to watch the recording of our interview, you can go to our YouTube channel, and that would be youtube.com, and you can search for TvH Group and look for the tortoise icon. Select that, and you'll be able to watch this live and the recorded format. And for those of you who are not into video and you like podcasting, you can listen to the podcast episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, basically any of the major podcast providers. So, Jon, we're not going to get into details in terms of what your role is. We're not going to get into details into what my role is in the firm at this point in time. I think we're going to have separate episodes for that. What we're going to talk about today is really the history behind TvH, how it all kind of started. I don't know with you, but I know whenever I meet with clients, a lot of times I ask, like, what does TvH stand for? How did it all start? How did the partnership evolve to where it is today? So I think today we're just going to walk down memory lane and try to remember how this all started, how it all came about, and then we can go from there. But before we get into that, maybe you can share what your role is at TvH.
Sure. I work on the lending side. I'm a registered mortgage broker. We do everything from new to it, first-time buyer status, have never even been to an open house types, all the way through to commercial and business-oriented loans, and just about everything in between. I would say beyond the residential, which is probably the bulk of our practice, we also have a very significant subset of people who are investment oriented and own a number of investment properties, because personally, that's also something that's particularly appealed to me over the years, and I think some of that passion has come through in dealing with my clients.
Right. And for me, I am a financial advisor, insurance advisor, and as I mentioned, I'm also a private wealth advisor through Raintree Financial Services. That's my role. But enough of that. Let's talk about how you and I met. I think I have an idea or a memory of how that all came about. Maybe I can get started and you can tell me if I'm wrong, or what your memory of the situation was. For me, back in 2007, I think that's where we first met. I was providing a strategy, an investment strategy called the Smith Maneuver. And I was working with another mortgage agent at the time who was helping me with the lending aspect of things. And a mutual friend of ours, of yours and mine, he had mentioned that you had started in the mortgage business. He knew that I was, offering this strategy, and asked if I would be interested in meeting with you, having a conversation with you. And at the time I said no. I was quite happy with who I was working with. But then, unfortunately, the individual that I was working with ended up getting sick. And we really didn't know how long he wouldn't be able to work. So he had suggested that there was someone in his office that would take over his files for him. And what was happening was I was referring my clients to this individual, and they weren't getting phone calls. So that was becoming a bit of a challenge. It was quite embarrassing. So I reached out to our mutual friend and said, I think I'm ready to meet the individual that you suggested. And I think made a phone call, and we decided to have an initial meeting up in Markham at the Tim Hortons. And how did it come about for you? Was it basically our friend saying, "Here's a guy you should talk to," or was it me just calling out of the blue all of a sudden? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
I'd recently left the corporate world, and the path of the mortgage side, the lending side, had been something I'd been building for a couple of years. And one of the things that I had done was prepare for the inevitable day when I took my first steps. And that mutual friend was someone who I used to work with at the previous firm. And as I did with a number of folks, I just reached out and said, "Hey, this is now what I'm doing. If you know someone who is going to be interested and someone who might be looking to partner up, let's put us in touch and we'll talk."
Right. Right. So I think again, I reached out to you. We decided to meet at the Tim Hortons in Markham, um, and I think we locked eyes across the room. Um, Well, back then, there really wasn't a lot of social media or a way to really do any research on an individual. So I didn't know what you looked like. You didn't know what I looked like. I would say that we were in Markham. Primarily, it's an Asian community, and you were meeting someone with the last name Lao, Lao, and I think you were probably looking for someone who was of Asian background, and I think you were quite surprised to find
It
out
was a little
that
surprising.
I was.
I think there's no
Yeah,
doubt, but needless to say, we made the connection, and I think the rest, as they say, is history. But yeah, definitely a bit of a surprise. But you know what? Everything seemed to work out just fine.
yeah. See, I knew it was you when you came in because you had the green pad folio from the previous firm that you worked with, and I
A dead
also
giveaway.
was a major broker for that firm. So once I saw that, I'm like, okay, that must be John. So yeah, so we had I think an initial conversation and thought, what, I think it's a good idea maybe to start referring business. I think that's really how we started off, right? Was me referring clients to you and you referring clients to me,
Yeah,
right?
it was a somewhat more casual approach at the time because we were getting to know each other and understand each other's business philosophies
Yeah,
and how we operated. I know we were both pretty
yeah,
adamant that there would be no payments changing hands. It would be either the right thing for the client or it wouldn't be, and we weren't going to be in a position where we were going to
yeah.
touch base and sort of expect a quid pro quo, if you will. It either made sense for the people we were
Right.
working with or not, and I think that that was actually something that for both of us was important and something that we both took note of because certainly.
Mhm.
Um, there are lots of people in the business who would anticipate if there is a referral they're sending your way that there will be some form of compensation coming the other.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we kind of started to again refer business, and I'd say we started off as acquaintances, referral partners, let's say. I think we were evolving into becoming friends and developing a friendship over that period of time, and I know I was very comfortable with introducing a lot of my clients over to you, and I believe you were comfortable doing the same in return. And I think at the time you had two little boys at home. Were they what, under the age of two, age of three?
They
Right.
they'd have had to have been by that stage. I think they were 1 and 2 respectively. They were 15 months apart.
Oh, right. Right. Now they're stinky teenagers.
Now they are stinky teenagers. It is absolutely true.
There you go. Yeah. And I had Serena, who would have been about 3 years old, and I was working from home out in Newcastle. And I know what was happening with me was whenever I'd hand a business card and they would see Newcastle, people would say, "Well, where's that?" And I would say to them, "Oh, that's Newcastle." Explain the location, and that I had worked from home. And at the time, people didn't quite, appreciate an individual who had a full-time office from home. Obviously, it's been different with COVID the last year and a
Going to
half,
say
right?
that's changed a little
But
bit.
back then, it has, right? But yeah, I remember I'd see some people's faces like, oh, and I think I came across a study around the same time too that talked about how successful advisors were the ones that actually went to an office every day and didn't work from home. So I think I had kind of thrown the idea out at the time. If you were interested maybe in finding a central location, you were in Mississauga, I was all the way at the east, maybe just to share some office space. And then I think that kind of evolved into something different um, over that period of discussion. And from my recollection, where it kind of started was the same friend of ours, mutual friend of ours. He had referred me to two advisors in Stouffville who were looking to sell their practice, their advisory practice, and it was a fairly significant size practice. And I had my initial meeting with them, and I was interested in investing in their business. And one of the questions I had asked was if they had marketed any mortgage product to their clientele, and of course they had said no. And that's where I thought there'd be an opportunity for you. And I think I called you and said, hey, here's a meeting that I just had. Here's what I'm thinking. Would you be interested in perhaps buying into the business with me? And then you started talking about the concept of a family office, which I didn't really know what that meant. I always felt that I wanted to build a business myself that was a one-stop shop. But you actually gave it a title or a name, and you said, "Oh, that's referred to a family office." So why don't you maybe kind of explain what a family office is and how you heard of that concept?
A family office is, as you mentioned, I think the simple summation is a one-stop shop, and the idea is that you can provide um, a level of information not just on your own area of subject matter expertise. So for me, that would be lending, for you, financial advice, um, but integrated information as well. So the simple reality is typically there are sort of four pillars, if you will, of most financial situations, and debt is a part of that, insurance and investment another, legal and accounting. Um, the trouble with most family offices is they're geared towards the ultra high net worth, and that's
Right.
potentially tens of millions of dollars, which is simply, not going to be within reach for the vast majority of people that we would be working with. But um,
Right.
working together with our individual practices and putting them together with, for example, us with investment and lending, and then our other partners who came in over the next couple of years, we were able to offer, much broader range of information, much more accurate. And as a result of the fact that we all worked together, sat in the same office, and essentially all had a similar level of understanding of our clients' knowledge, a chance for us to provide a far more cohesive strategy. And I think that, as we get close to the better part of 15 years since we started working together, I have clients come back to me, clients who've been with us for a decade or more, and say, you know what, Jon, had we not done some of these things back when you had suggested it all those years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I, I don't pretend to have heirs. I'm not curing cancer or anything like that, but it sure feels nice when you have someone comes back and says, you know what, I don't have to work full time now, and I can spend more time with my family, my kids, my ailing parents, whatever it is, because we took your suggestions all that time ago. And here we sit now, much further ahead as a result. And thank you very much. It's a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, in talking about the concept, then at the end of the day, I didn't end up, or you and I didn't end up investing in that other practice. They had decided to work with or sell to another individual. But that's when I think you said to me, "Hey, why don't we do this anyway?" And kind of build it organically and start from scratch. And I was a little hesitant at the time. I think I had a bad experience previously, so I definitely was a little gun shy. and it took a while for me to kind of get to the point where I'd said, yeah, okay, I think we should do this as partners. I think I was definitely more in favor of just renting space and sharing space. And I think also the other challenge was our industries wouldn't allow us to partner up, but then that had changed around that time, right? Where a mortgage agent couldn't really offer mutual funds and vice versa,
Well,
right?
we had to do some additional licensing, and we had to jump through quite a
Good.
few hoops. And for those listening, it didn't just include the mortgage broker and the financial advisor. It got to the point where we were also including a lawyer, which has a whole different level of scrutiny. The chartered accountant folks also like to make sure that everyone is properly vetted. So that was probably a 12 to 18 month process. It definitely took some time.
It was, and I don't remember too. Like ultimately, when we agreed to partner, again, you were very patient with me. You had said whatever it takes, you just let me know. And I think all I really wanted was that we had an agreement in place that we signed off on, and we went through that process. So for me, I definitely took a leap of faith because again, I had a bad experience once before, but this just felt different. It definitely felt right for me. So we moved forward. And again, I don't recall if it was me mentioning to you one day, like, do we consider buying a place instead of renting, or if it was you that made the suggestion. But I know when you started looking at, the option of buying a space, I think it was doable, based on what would have been required at the time. I think it solidified us as partners. I think, for me, it felt like it was more of a marriage, right? If we owned property as opposed to just renting a place that we can potentially walk away from. So it almost kind of forced us to work through the ups and downs. And, we found our first location there on Duncan Mill in North York. And I think, what was it, about 1,000 square feet?
It was 1,000 square feet, pretty much exactly.
Yeah. And I know for me, again, I'll say this, up until that point, I had no experience in renovations, working with contractors, any of those things. So I probably made it a little bit more difficult for you at the
Maybe.
time. I've since have experience. Yeah, I mean, since then I've had lots of experience in being partnered with you, but I think the first one was definitely kind of like having a newborn, right? So it was quite interesting times for me. That's for sure.
It might have been reasonable to suggest in those instances that if I was the gas, you were the brakes. But we found a balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you figured out a way to cut the brake lines so we can get through to the finish.
Perfect.
And then what happened? We took possession. What was it, October 3rd of 2008?
I
right
think it was
around
technically the day
global
we
market
entered into
meltdown.
recession in 2008. And I remember we got the news,
The
and
worst historical.
that's right. You
Yeah,
came into the office and said, "Oh my gosh, we've hit recession." And I said, "Great, there's nowhere to go but up." And looks like I nailed that one because it's been a good time since.
all you did, because I remember laying in bed, watching the news with my wife Carol, and we're like, we're gonna lose everything. Like that was the fear at the time. And the opposite happened. I think when we finished our first year, we were up about 20% over what we had projected. And I know in my industry, a lot of advisors, they weren't even answering the phone. They weren't talking to clients. They were down 50% in business themselves. And I don't think we were able to put a finger onto why we were up 20. We just knew that, there was something that we were doing right. We just didn't at the time really understand what that was.
Well, I think
Right?
in fairness, you work hard most of the time. You never complain too much if you have a little bit of downtime, but when you work for yourself, you work hard most of the
Yeah.
time. Um, and when things go south, like they did in 2008 with the credit crunch, you have the option of either, trying to hide or doing your best to face front and walk into it. And I think we were pretty successful at doing that, and clients weren't always happy, and the market wasn't always easy. But I think for the most part, people appreciated that, as you said, we didn't turn off our phones and hide under the desk, and that I think as the recovery eventually hit, I think by staying active and by helping people manage through that. We were beneficiaries, our clients were beneficiaries, they were better positioned, we were better able to capture what we needed to do to get back at it, and again, just do our best to sort of push forward.
Yeah, for sure. And so we had location, we had staff. What we were trying to work on was the name, right?
Mm.
So TvH, a lot of people ask, what does that stand for? Tortoise versus hare. The slow and steady. And I know that. So originally, before you and I had partnered up, my company that I was running on my own was TvH Wealth Planning, and obviously that wouldn't have been a good fit for the mortgage side of things. And I think we were trying to come up with different names, and I don't think you liked not necessarily the concept of TVH. I think some of the logos that we were looking at with the bunny rabbits and tortoises and stuff, right?
Yeah, I was
But
probably a little
ultimately, you
resistant
agreed to
initially. I
TVH.
think I was probably a little resistant initially. It took a little bit of convincing. Again, you're right, not for the concept, but with regard to how we were going to present it,
Yeah,
and we got there eventually.
yeah.
But I think a big part of that was
Well, I was going to say the big part would have been your
I
wife,
was
right?
about to exactly
Is that
say
where you're
that.
going with this?
My wife
All
is
right, there you go.
from Thailand. English is not her first language.
Yeah.
There is a fairly significant divide in terms of folklore and legend. And I remember sitting down and talking to her about what we were trying to accomplish, and I told her a little bit about the idea of the tortoise versus hare, and she was unfamiliar with the story. And I told her the story, and she said, "Oh, you know what? We've got something just like that in Thailand." I thought, well, that's interesting because
Right.
I, at this stage, had been with my wife for many years and recognized that there
Right.
were, few and far between were the similarities between sort of, the Western and Eastern cultures as I saw it. So I started to do a little
Right.
research and found out that it was actually a fairly universal topic, something that seemed to have some sort of a hold. And I think the number I saw was almost 90% of the cultures in the world had some form of that story in one fashion or
Wow.
another. And when I saw that, I thought, you know what?
Yeah.
That's pretty universal. It's the sort of thing most people will understand, even without sort of going into detail. And I did. I rethought my opposition to it, if you will, and here we sit, TVH to
Right.
this day.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, the reason why I came up with it, being the investment advisor, I prefer the value-based approach, which is a very much a slow and steady approach. And I would just remember I'd be in meetings with clients and I would try to explain what value meant and all those things. And it didn't really matter what level of sophistication the client had. They would struggle with it. And I would ultimately say to them, tortoise versus hare, you know the story? Yes, I do. We're the tortoise, slow and steady. And everyone would always respond with, I get that, right? So that's where we came with TVH. So we just needed a better logo than what
I think
some
we got
people
there.
were
I think we
presenting.
got there.
I think we did. Yeah. Even recently, I had someone comment. They said, "Wow, like it has the indigenous feel to it, and very Canadiana." And I'm like, "That's exactly what we felt when we saw it." I don't think we asked for that. I think it was our web designer who kind of sent us a bunch of mock-ups, and I think you and I kind of looked at that and go, "Wow, that's it." So that's how that all started. And again, we were in our first location at Duncan Mill. I have to admit, I actually missed that location. I think we were on the sixth floor, and at the time when we bought it, 1,000 square feet. I think there was only a total of four of us, right? I think you had a full-time staff member, I had a full-time staff member, and it was you and I. And I think we thought, we'd be good for about 3 to 5 years in that location, and maybe we'd have to expand. And I think we grew out of it fairly quickly. But before we get into that and how we grew out of that location, one of the things that we did do when we started our partnership was we had a client appreciation event at the was it the David Duncan House? Is that what it
That's
was called?
right.
Yeah, beautiful place, fantastic food, and I think your intention and my intention was we really wanted to thank the people that had transacted with us, that had referred other individuals to us. For me, who have shown loyalty, and really just wanted to thank them. And I remember that first evening where I had clients show up and they would ask me, say, "Okay, well, who's presenting tonight?" Right? And I'd say, "Well, the bartender and the waiter." Because a lot of the clients, they were accustomed to being invited to these client appreciation events, and then there would be someone there with a sales pitch, right? And you and I, from day one, we had always said that's not what these were about. We didn't want to have a sales pitch. It was literally a thank you event. And even for me, I had some of the companies I represent who had offered to provide me with marketing dollars towards the event, but I'd have to have one of their logo pieces. And I'm like, no, this is a thank you very much. And if we do have a seminar, we'll let you know it's a seminar and what the topic is, right? You felt the same way?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that most people are waiting for the pitch in those situations. Um, and
Mm.
for us, I think one of the things that, again, for the listeners to understand is the partners at TvH, we all very much practice what we preach. So, for example, I have done a lot of work with investment portfolios and building rental property portfolios. Every single partner at TvH has some form of investment property. We believe in things like insurance for investment. Every single partner at TVH has some form of insurance for investment. We all believe in equities in the stock market and a properly managed portfolio, financial plans, wills, proper accounting. So again, we really do try very hard to practice what we preach. I think as a result over the years, because we are in keeping with the TVH, not trying to turn over a quick buck. We're trying to build things over time. I think as people come to know us and they come to know the firm, they see that again we do very much walk the walk. And that was, I think,
Yeah.
just a culmination in our early period of walking the walk. And we just, like you said, wanted to have people out to say thanks, not to bash them over the head with the next greatest product.
Right, exactly. So we went from, or at least I went from, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose everything, right, to within about 2 years, outgrowing our space,
Not
right?
even. I mean, I think day one we walked into the fully finished space after the contractors had finished, and you looked at it and said, "Gosh, what are we going to do with all this space?" And within, I think, like I said, I don't even think it was 2 years. I think it was more like 18 months. We were looking for our second location.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where Marine Parade came in,
Correct.
right? Um, what was that? About 1,000 square feet for that
Probably
space as
not
well,
so big. Probably
or a little smaller?
about 750. But again, in that instance,
Yeah,
we were splitting out, and your team had grown, and my team had grown. So, we had sufficient space, as it were, to cover what was required.
yeah. And where was that located again? I know South Etobicoke, but I know you're better
Just
with
down at the mouth
exact
of the Humber
locations. Maybe you can
River.
share that.
So,
Right.
right down at the southernmost tip of Etobicoke, right at the base of the Humber River, and we were a stone's throw. And again, for the few years we were there, lovely to go out in the morning and smell the lake air and enjoy a nice breeze off of the water. Definitely a location I quite
Yeah.
enjoyed for the time I was there.
Yeah. What was that restaurant that we would go to? That, I mean, fantastic
Yeah.
food.
Couldn't tell you, but again,
It was
all sort
amazing.
of fit in nicely. You'd
Yeah.
you'd
We,
walk over for your lunch. They had a little patio. We'd often take clients for a sit down to go through things. It was again a very nice atmosphere.
yeah. Yeah, and that's where I would have my espressos and my stale cookies, as you call
Exactly.
them, right? Yeah. So what we did was, I guess we moved again your team because you were in Mississauga. It just made sense for you to be at that location, and for me to keep my team at the Duncan Mill location. And I think after that, we kind of sat back that, okay, now we're going to be good
That's what we thought.
for 3 to 5 years with the two locations, right? And how long were we there for with the two
Not
locations before
long.
we outgrew them?
Again, a year and a half with the two, and then our next partner, Sonia, on the legal side, uh, ended up as a client of mine initially. Liked working with her. Made her aware about some of the things that we were looking to do. Uh, Developed the conversation, and that led us in. I believe it was the fall of 2010 to place an offer on a commercial property right downtown. Again, closed early 2011, fairly significant renovation. Again,
Mm-hmm.
probably 5 or 6 months. And by, it would have been about this time, it would have been September of 2011, we moved into our Lombard location.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about Sonia then, our third
Mm-hmm.
partner that we added to the mix. So I think again that was you and I recognizing that we outgrew the existing space. We had always talked, under this family office concept of adding a lawyer partner and an accounting partner, and the accountant ended up being the most challenging find for us ultimately. And to your point, Sonia was a client of yours, ended up being a client of mine. And I think the way this came about was you and I were looking at a location. Was it on Carlton Street or
We,
near
we'd
Carlton
looked at a
Street?
few, and we'd been talking to
Yeah,
Sonia. We still
yeah,
weren't certain if we wanted to necessarily amalgamate, but I think the point was made, and I think you made it, and I think it was a good point, and obviously we followed up on it, was um, we collaborated better, we worked together better when we were physically in the same
mhm,
location. And it wasn't to say
yeah,
we didn't have a high level of communication and collaboration when we were split out, but the fact of the matter is,
right,
you get up and you go to the water cooler and you have an exchange of ideas. That there's something to that. So the three of us
yeah,
agreed that we were going to go out and find that place, and we looked at a
yeah,
few, came close on a few, but ultimately settled for the Church in Adelaide area, which is where we still are to this
yeah,
date, and again Lombard Street,
yeah,
and went from there.
yeah. And I remember you calling me saying, I found the perfect location. This was after we lost out on an offer, which you had referred to as our perfect location. And quite honestly, I think it would have been. But we had talked about that location just recently and probably worked out to the best that we didn't end up moving there. But for me, because again, my experience isn't really in real estate, I have a difficult time envisioning or seeing what you see in these places. So I remember walking in. Now we're street level, right, on Strict Three entranceway. Walking into basically a lime green
It needed
box,
some work.
almost what, almost
It
4,000
needed
square.
some work.
Yeah,
I
and
know how everyone associates people who work in debt finance and mortgages with being incredibly creative. Or probably not.
yeah,
Uh, but needless to say, when I walked in, although the place, I think it would be fair to say, was hideous, um, I was able to, in my mind, get a reasonable idea, not of the color schemes and the finishes. That's certainly not me, but the layout. And I thought it was going to be very workable based on what we did. Um, you and Sonia were both kind enough to trust me, and like we said,
right.
I think when we got the contractors in there and they started sketching it out, and we sort of saw how it's going to come together, it made it a little easier for you guys. But yes, again, to your point about leaps of faith in buying property with me, probably a second leap of faith was committed.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember following you around the location as you're kind of in your mind envisioning the layout and everything. And I finally think said, John, I can't see what you're seeing, so can you please explain it to me, right? And you did, and I'm like, okay, I still don't see it, but I'm going to trust you, that this is the space. And yeah, it worked out great. It was a great location for us, and adding Sonia as well. I think, although in fairness, when we had to pick, furniture and stuff like that and colors, I would kind of sit back and just whatever you guys pick, I don't care. I really didn't have a whole lot of interest in that part of the process. So you and Sonia kind of took that over with the interior
We,
designer,
we
right?
we definitely had some guidance from an interior designer, and no one was injured in the decorating of our office, which is the important thing.
There you go. There you go. And yeah, so that location, about 3,800 square feet,
Just shy of
right?
4, so definitely a much bigger space, even than our 3 offices combined. Allowed us to
Yeah, yeah.
expand to the next partner, David, our chartered accountant, allowed us to continue to add more staff to address the increased level of business that we saw. Definitely had
Yeah.
a nice boardroom for having people in to review plans, etc. It again at the time it ticked a lot of boxes.
Yeah, it did. So let's talk about adding Dave as a partner.
Well,
That was an interesting
accountants are
situation, right?
tricky because a lot of times they're lone wolves. They work on their own. Oftentimes they work a lot, and the idea maybe of stepping out of that comfort zone to work with someone else maybe isn't where their first thought goes. But we
Mhm.
met with Dave after meeting with a number of folks. I think we all agreed. We thought there was something there. But
Mhm.
again, like you, David had some less than wonderful experiences attempting to partner with people in the past. And it took a little while for us to find that level of comfort. But I think, again, we got there and Dave settled in. And I think now he's been with us for a decade. So, we
Mhm.
managed to make it work, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, but even before being connected to Dave, I think we had hired, was it a headhunter friend that you knew
We
in the
tried a
business,
variety of
right?
things, is what we did.
We did, yeah. And then I think we were introduced to an individual who ultimately agreed to partner with us. And in January is when we would have our Platinum Client events. And we had this individual out with his wife because we were going to make the big announcement that we were starting our own accounting firm, and this individual was going to be heading that up. So that was well received by everybody. And I think he was supposed to start March the 1st, I believe it was. And I think it was, I don't know, 9 o'clock the night before, where he emailed all three of us saying, "Yeah, I'm backing out," after we had negotiated over many months. So that was, that was difficult to swallow. And I think what had happened was I just sent out an email to people that I knew just to say, "Hey, the accountant backed out. We're willing to rent the space, that office space, if you know anybody." And I think it was someone that reached out to me saying, "Well, here's an individual that might be interested in the partnership," and reach out to him. So I think with Dave, again, to your point, he did have a bad experience in a partnership like I did once before. So he was definitely a little bit gun shy. And what we had offered to him was, why don't you move in? Let's live together for 6 to 8 months and see how it goes. And obviously, he fit in perfectly, and that's how the partnership as it is today in TVH basically has evolved over the years, right?
Exactly.
Anything else to add to that?
Well, we had a good run at our Lombard office, and then recently we decided that, and this is presciently enough before COVID, that with advances in technology and things like telecommuting, that we didn't have as many people in the office anymore. So once again, we decided we were going to shrink our footprint a little bit. The timing is never perfect in these instances, but we ended up relocating
Right.
just down the street, still in Lombard, because we definitely like the area, and we wanted to wait
Yeah.
to get the right place, but moved down the street, slightly smaller office, but given the number of people nowadays, and again with COVID, seemed to work very well. Working from home, again, just sort of the next chapter, and I think as the business has grown, things like our systems and our processes have improved. And the fact of the matter is, we can now manage a much higher workload. And in order to be more flexible and more fluid, it doesn't necessarily mean we all have to be at our desk in downtown Toronto. So a little bit of a full circle, if you will, from the, gosh, I don't want to be at home to, hey, it's not so bad to be at
Yeah.
home.
Right, exactly. And we are about a block west of our
Mm-hmm.
previous location on Lombard. So I think we're technically considered that we're in the financial district now. So all that really means is that the burgers are $12 here, then as opposed to $8 east
That's
of
right.
us, right?
Before we were Mavericks and we were outside the official zone, but moving all of
Uh,
50
uh,
meters across the street, it's a whole different ballpark now.
right. So I want to kind of go back to our client events a little bit because we were doing them year over year. We started off at Duncan Mill, and then eventually we moved them down to Biagio's in downtown Toronto when we moved down here. And I think it was the third Friday of January that we were doing these. And it seemed like that third Friday of January always had some major snowstorm. So there was lots of fun, right? But going back to I think the thought process why we had started and offered those events and why we've stopped them now is for me it was an opportunity to meet up with clients again on a more social basis, not on a necessarily professional basis, and just talk to them a little bit more outside of the business. And what I was finding, and I don't know if you were finding the same thing, was as we were growing, more clients were able to come out to these events. And I was finding that I wasn't really able to spend enough quality time with an individual client because there'd be, oh, well, so and so showed up now, so now I have to go and say hello to them and on and on. And it no longer felt like an intimate, event with our clients. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
the growth of the business has been great on many levels, but it does make some of those things a little bit more difficult. I know on occasion we've had smaller groups here and there, but really I think from my end, and I think similarly from yours, is we just try to concentrate on the touch points that we can. And the idea of sort of a great big circus event, if you will. It was certainly fun in the olden days, but now it's not as
Mm.
practical and, as you say, not as intimate as it used to be. So you look for other ways in which to make that connection.
Yeah, so I know well, right before COVID, I had my last event with some of TvH financial clients, and I think that was my last social event with clients because it was February of 2020. So I'm hoping for me personally that once we're allowed to, that I'll be offering those events again as well. And I know you were doing some things along the way yourself, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that I like about this job is not necessarily the great big events where you're up at the podium addressing a cast of thousands, but the one-on-ones, the lunches and the dinners, the sit downs over a cup of coffee and just having a chat and how are things going and how's your family and how's the portfolio
Yeah.
developing, and that's a lot of fun. I think most people who are in this type of a
Mhm.
business enjoy working with people and enjoy working with their clientele. And I'll say this, we've had an opportunity over the years to build a clientele of some really nice people. I can't think of anyone who I wouldn't want to sit
Mhm.
down and have a drink and catch up with. And that makes the job a lot
Yeah.
easier. It's a lot more fun to come to work when you like the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, and let's kind of clear that up a little bit. You said job a couple of times in work. Um, some people misunderstand the structure. Like sometimes I'm being asked if I'm an employee of TVH. So maybe we can kind of clear that up
Sure.
a little bit. We're all partners in TVH. We all have equal share or ownership in TVH,
We all
right?
run,
So we're not
that's
employees.
right.
Yeah.
We all run our
Right.
individual practices, and we all have our individual clients. And there are some people who will come to the
Yeah.
firm and only deal with me or only deal with Jim on the financial advice side or our lawyer or accountant.
Yeah.
Um, but what has happened over the years is people have said, gosh, it's kind of a hassle to have to go and do this at one place and this at another place, and then sort of deal with, competing interests and competing advice. Jon, do you have a solution? And I always say, yes, didn't you know we had all these other partners here? But of course, people are busy, and I get that that's not always where their head goes. But the fact is, what I think happens more often than not is over time, we've seen people migrate to using not just one of us, but two of us, three of us, sometimes even all four of us. And again, the benefit of our structure is not only are you getting good advice from people who are subject matter experts, but the convenience factor is significant. Because if you touch base with me and you want to do some financing and you're maybe self-employed or someone who has a variable component in your compensation, like a bonus structure or commissions, and you don't have your paperwork to hand, but you're a client of the firm and you work with our accountant Dave, guess what? In just a few minutes with a simple email, we can prepare everything based on the information on file. Sonia, our lawyer, you've worked with her before at this stage. We just send the documentation over to her. Yeah, it can be a very, very smooth process. And I think in a day and age where people value time more than ever, especially given what the pandemic has done in terms of sort of robbing people of some of their time, people take that seriously. And I think the people who have come over to work with the partners in sort of a whole as opposed to in individual connections, I think they appreciate that as well.
Right. I didn't send you my notes for the podcast because that's exactly what I want to talk about next was the benefits of our partnership for our clients, right? But I think, again, it kind of shows how in tune we are with each other. Because I remember when we were developing our website years ago with David and Sonia as partners, we had hired a writer, and I forget the individual's name. It was someone that you knew, and he wanted to meet with us separately. And I think he came out and was surprised, pleasantly surprised, on how a lot of our responses were very similar. Right? We shared the same values. We shared the same approach in working with our clients. So I think what I really appreciate is the fact that there is a natural fit with the partners. Has it always been perfect and smooth sailing? Absolutely not. We are family as well. And like all families, we have our arguments and our issues, but at the end of the day, we respect each other. We trust each other, which I think is ultimately the most important thing as well. And we're very close friends. So it's been definitely a good partnership. And I think the other benefit to our clients, and I know you don't like me using this word holistic, but we do look at everything at a high level, right? Where if someone went into the bank looking for a mortgage, it's tunnel vision, right? And that individual is just focusing on the mortgage and only the mortgage that they're able to offer, and not looking at the total picture, right? And the impact. Similarly with me and on the investment side and the advisory side, right? So we definitely take more of a holistic approach as well in working with our clients. So are you okay that I use that word?
I'll get over it.
All right, there you go. So let's talk about COVID. Because it's been, in our lives for the last 18 months now plus, right? How has it impacted the way you do business? And, has it impacted the way you do business?
We've been a lot busier because, again, on the real estate side, people have been driven to try, and now that they can't necessarily spend as much time in public spaces to try and improve their private spaces, and that often requires financing. From a process perspective, we were, although I'm a bit of a Luddite and certainly not the technophile that you are, Jim, we actually, I think, had a pretty reasonable process, one that was, relatively smooth with regard to our use and integration of the technologies available to us. The trick was it was an awful lot of work and not the chance to get out and go to the gym or do some of the things that I might have liked otherwise. But from a business perspective, we actually ended up adding some staff because of how busy we were. And I would say all in, it's gone swimmingly. I think the big miss from my perspective is we have essentially curtailed all face-to-face client meetings, and that was something I used to enjoy. But you do your best with the new world reality, and you want to just try and sort of work through it. I will say I have yet to be an adopter of the Zoom call. I think I've had about 2, and when people say, "Hey, John, let's do a Zoom call," I usually say something like, "My phone works fine, thank you very much," which is funny because I'm not even at home. It's not like I'm sitting around in shorts and a t-shirt. I'm at the office. I was at the office every day all throughout the pandemic. I think that again, that's probably the biggest impact. Is I used to know what all of my clients looked like. I used to, over the course of a mortgage financing or a lifetime as a client, have often sat down with them many times, often to a meal or a cup of coffee or some such. And that's probably the biggest change, and it's the one I probably lament the most. But again, as needs must, and we'll deal with that as we have to.
Yeah, I think for me, to your point, I've definitely been the techie guy, and that's why my role. And again, in talking about the partnership, you tend to manage the day-to-day operations of TvH, right? Sonia's role is in dealing with the real estate aspect, with her being a real estate lawyer and contracts. Dave obviously does the accounting for TvH, and for me, I'm the techie guy. So my job has always been, putting in place our technology. So it wasn't really anything different for me to do a Zoom call or Teams call or whatever else. I think where I have struggled is pre-COVID. My schedule was such where I would come into the office a couple of days a week, and I would work from home a day or 2 days a week, and 1 to 2 days, again, depending on my schedule, I would be out and about in the road. And I loved that variety. Being at home every single day and doing these Zoom meetings. And for me, I have to do these types of meetings because I'm actually presenting plans and things. So there's a lot of visualization, right? It was getting a little much, and I avoided coming down to the office from, I guess, September of 2020 till about July of this year. Partially because, again, most people know that I had open heart surgery back in 2019, so I'm considered at risk, and I didn't want to take that chance. So it was difficult to be away from the office for 9 months and working from home every day. Now I'm glad things are opening up. I'm still not meeting people in person, but to your point, it's something that I did enjoy in the past. It's something that I know that I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to doing again once it's safe enough to do so. But I would also not be surprised if more of my meetings, even after COVID is over with, will continue on being, Zoom based or Teams based or, video conference based. And it's nice to be around the partners, and it's nice to be around the staff. There is that disconnect. And I think that's what you and I felt when you were at Marine Parade and I was at Duncan Mill, right? There was that disconnect. It just didn't feel the same way. So I think we're kind of reliving it again, right?
Yeah, I would agree. There's value in face to face. There's value in collaborating that way.
Yeah.
It's not to say that over COVID, we weren't communicating, but it's simply not the same. It's maybe more efficient in some ways, but it's not always more effective.
Yeah. Although I definitely have less kilometers on the car now.
There is that. You gotta look for the positive where you can.
Yeah, and there's less cursing and swearing because, again,
less traffic.
The commute coming down. Yeah, less traffic and all that stuff, right? So I'm definitely. It's a different type of stress, let's say, right? Where I just need to meet people. So we're going to kind of close things out shortly. In terms of the vision of the future for TvH, how do you see it?
Frankly, more of the same. I mean, I've enjoyed the better part of the last 15 years immensely. I'm the guy who sometimes likes to talk about things like early retirement, but as my wife and most of my family have pointed out, what would I do that I enjoy more than this? And the simple reality is, and again, I think this is the same for all the partners. We all enjoy what we do. I'd like to just continue doing it. It's interesting. It's fun. At the risk of sounding cliche, it's sort of a little bit different every day, and there's always sort of new and interesting things to try and figure out. So, it speaks to me on a lot of levels, and it's been a good time on top of all of that. So I would say that's where my mind is, and that's where I hope we continue to go.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're moving anywhere else after this, right? I think this might be our final stop. Let's hope. We have a long-term lease, and again, I don't plan on going anywhere. I think when you and I first met and we did talk about our retirement goals, it's funny. I think you were looking for that early retirement, and I always said I don't plan on retiring because I love what I do, and it's not something that I need to run away from. And I think with COVID, you've probably realized as tiring as you get, because again, you and I work different hours, right, as well. You're more of a night owl. I'm not. You put in a lot of hours, but I think you really like what you do,
Right.
and I think we've both heard if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life,
Something
right?
I heard from my dad once upon a time, and something I saw him live every day. And I would say my closing point probably is it was about the fourth day into the Christmas break when I had watched everything I
Right.
needed to watch on Netflix and rested all I needed to rest to sort of get back the lost energy that I had needed to recharge on. That I with the inability to go out and do things and the inability to go and go to the gym or go to a restaurant or whatnot, I realized that you know what, I probably like the idea of an early retirement far more than I'd like the actual early retirement. And like I said, that was a bit of a paradigm shift for me. So needless to say, that's where my head's at now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know at one point I was starting to shift focus in terms of retirement, and then I had the heart surgery, and I was forced to stay home for 4 months and not work at all. And I realized, this could be every day of my life in retirement. And I spent a lot of time surfing Netflix and not finding anything, and I'm just like, I can't do this. Like I love what I do.
I get you.
Right? So yeah,
Well,
I believe the other partners feel the same way, and I know I'm going to be interviewing them individually as well. In closing, what I will say is I will have another podcast episode where I'll be interviewing Jon as the father, the husband, the mortgage broker as well. So maybe we'll go back to your childhood if you want.
Anything's possible.
You feel.
Very exciting stuff.
Right. There you go. So if anybody would like to speak with Jon and or myself, what I recommend you do is head over to our website, tvhgroup.ca, and you'll actually see pictures of the four partners. Just click the picture of the partner you're looking to connect with, and that'll take you to their page and their contact information. Or Jon, they can reach you, Jon at tvhgroup.ca. And what's the number they should call you at if they
416-488-0074. Again, that's 416-488-0074. And if it's during the daytime, it will come to me or potentially one of my team here in the office. If it's after hours, it might ring a little bit, but it will eventually go to voicemail, and generally we'll get back to you as soon as we can from there.
Great. And my contact information, if you want to email me, financial@tvhgroup.ca, or you can reach us at 647-727-4668. Jon, this was fun walking down memory lane. Some changes in how we look. We don't quite look the same way. We definitely are more experienced. Yes, I think I've added a few pounds along the way. Well, again, it's all the fantastic restaurants that we've been able to to meet at, and we've had many a meal together, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So thanks again. Really enjoyed it, and everyone, take
All
care.
right. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
See you, John.